Coming up on this episode,
I could generate much more by writing than I could by watching movies. So it was pretty simple at that stage. I couldn't really, it would be irresponsible not to have quit. And you see it all the time. Whenever there's a gold rush, usually the people who make the most money are the people selling shovels. It should be a no-brainer. So you've got these properties which are demonstrated to sell at high volumes. They get great reviews. Readers love them. Why wouldn't they love them in print? It made absolutely no sense to me why we hadn't seen a flood of these deals.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 100 of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Thank you so much for being here for episode number 100. It's always special when you reach a particular landmark, and 100 is one of those landmarks. Now, I've been doing this podcast since the first week of January 2018, and if you're doing your math, I shouldn't be at episode number 100 until later in the year, but I've actually stuck in not only the weekly podcast, but every once in a while I've thrown in an additional episode, which is why I'm at 100 a little bit earlier. If you have been a listener to the podcast from the beginning, awesome! Thank you so much for taking this ride with me all the way. If you are newer to the podcast and joined along the way, thanks for joining the crew. And if this is your first episode, well, awesome! Congratulations! You made it to episode number 100 with me. Let's hope you stick it out for at least number 101. In this episode, I have an interview with Mark Dawson, who is an international best-selling author from the UK. Now, prior to his rise as an author, he has worked as a DJ, a door-to-door ice cream seller, a factory hand, a club promoter, and a lawyer. Now, Mark is presently writing 3 series. His John Milton books involve a disgruntled British assassin who is trying, without much success, to put his past behind him. The Beatrix Rose series follows the adventures of the most dangerous woman ever to serve at Her Majesty's pleasure, and the Soho Noir books follow the glitz and glamour of criminal life in London's West End from the 1940s to the present day. But Mark isn't just an author, he is an advocate for indie publishing and self-publishing, and he has taken his own experiences and all the analytics that he has done, and he's turned that around to give it back to the author community, which he does through his podcast that he co-hosts with James Blatch, as well as the many courses that he offers to authors to help teach them the ins and outs of self-publishing. Mark is at the center of what I think is one of the most interesting things in the publishing industry today with the advent of the rise of digital publishing, and that is a deal that he signed that is so forward-looking. It is so much a deal that can change the face of digital publishing forever, and the way that traditional publishers and indie authors can actually work together in a mutually beneficial relationship. I'm really excited to dig into that, but we'll get to the interview with Mark and about that particular element in a little bit more detail. But first, I'm going to share some comments from recent episodes of the podcast. Now, on episode 98, which was You Can Handle It with Laurie Wright, Chad Boyer commented, I feel there's a lot of similarities between 4- and 5-year-olds and repetition and writers. You have to keep saying to yourself that you can do it and finish it before you believe it. The interview was for a different audience than I am in or targeting, but there are a lot of good things in here. I liked her plan of making sure she has multiple streams of income coming from the single series. Thanks for that comment, Chad. Yeah, I agree with you. We really do need to keep saying those things to ourselves. And this is something that I value as well, is I get this when I listen to a great podcast like Joanna Penn's The Creative Pen podcast, is even if the author or the guest that she has on the show is not an area that I'm particularly interested in or needing to or wanting to learn more about, I find I always get some value from it because there's that creative experience, there's the writer who has done something, and there's always nuggets of wisdom that can be had, no matter who the guest is or what their perspective is, whether it's traditional publishing or self-publishing, whether you're talking to an editor or a publisher or a marketing person, or whether it's somebody who's doing something creative that's not even directly related to what you do. I always find there's something of value you can get from them. So thanks for that comment, Chad. There were some comments on episode 99 as well, and episode 99 was the episode where I talked about libraries, and I went into detail about working with libraries. And Katie Mack posted, "Thanks for this episode, Mark. Chock-a-block with interesting details as usual." Oh, and I clicked the link and bought the bundle. She was talking about the story bundle, the NaNoWriMo story bundle, which I'll include a link to in the show notes, because it's still good until, I believe, for at least another 30 days now. Thanks for that, Kathy. Caro also left a comment for that episode and said, "Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge about libraries. As always, this episode was packed with useful information. I really enjoyed listening to your podcast, so keep those episodes coming." And thanks, Caro, and thank you for asking that amazing question, because I owe you the fact that that episode exists. So thanks for listening, and thanks for asking for things that you want to hear. Just a reminder to all you listeners that if there is a particular topic that you want me to cover, please go ahead and ask. I should also let you guys know that as I was listening back to the last episode, the episode on libraries, and I was reflecting on actually listening to Stark Reflections, which is very meta, I imagine, I realized that that was something I should put into book format. And so I've actually started to compile based on the notes that I put together for that episode and the episode on book selling, as well as some episodes talking about the book industry in general, is an author's guide to working with bookstores and libraries, because I think that's of value. Again, it's going to be one of the shorter books. It'll probably come in maybe in the 10,000 word range, and that's something that I plan on having out before the end of 2019 in my Stark Publishing Solutions imprint, where I released the 7 Ps of publishing success, as well as Killing It on Kobo. And again, I owe it to you listeners and your comments and your questions, because it's the things that you're asking about and the things that you're talking about that kind of inspire me to know what I should be doing. So that's really, really cool. I love that interactivity. Now, speaking of interactivity, there's a bit of Twitter action in the last little while. And for episode 99, Ellen Jacobson said, "I love seeing my books in libraries. I want to get yours into library shelves. Check out this informative podcast by Mark Leslie." Thanks for sharing that, Ellen. Mars Dorian said, for episode 97, informative podcast episode for authors, 10 tips for marketing and making money off your short fiction via Mark Leslie. Learned some gems, especially the tips about foreign markets and joining bundles. Thanks, Mars. Appreciate that. Glad you got some good tips out of that. And Joanna Penn of the Creative Pen shared 10 tips for marketing and making money off your short fiction. And hashtag book marketing, hashtag writing community. Thanks so much for sharing that, Joe. Glad that you found it helpful as well. If you do have questions or you want to leave comments to the podcast, you can do that over on starkreflections.ca, or you can also @ me on Twitter. I'm at Mark Leslie. And now it's time for a word from this episode's sponsor, Findaway Voices. Did you know that Findaway Voices is making it easier than ever to generate giveaway codes and keep track of which ones have been redeemed? Giving your audiobook to groups or to reviewers is a great way to increase awareness and introduce new readers to your work. Every audiobook that you distribute through Findaway Voices receives 30 giveaway codes. Or, if you enroll in Voices Plus, you can get 100 giveaway codes per title. Just click Generate My Codes on your giveaway codes page, and 30 unique giveaway codes will be automatically generated for you to use. With this feature, you can copy each code individually, or you can copy them all at the same time. And you'll be able to track which codes have been redeemed and when, and any code you've already distributed will still be visible. You can use these codes to send to reviewers or to anyone else that you want to provide a free copy of your audiobook. This is yet another great feature that helps put the power and the control back into the hands of you, the author. And you can learn more about this feature on Findaway Voices, as well as many other features, how you can work with narrators and how you can use Findaway Voices for distribution over at starkreflections.ca/findaway. In terms of a personal update, just wanted to share the fact that Canadian Thanksgiving was this past weekend, so the weekend of the 12th and 13th of October. October 14th, Monday, which would have been Columbus Day in the United States, and Thanksgiving in Canada. Nothing to folks who are overseas like in the UK, because Thanksgiving is sort of about that discovery of North America by settlers coming from across the pond, like Christopher Columbus, etc. Anyways, it was Canadian Thanksgiving, so it was supposed to be a rainy weekend. Liz and I had a couple of her girls over with their boyfriends for a nice dinner on Sunday. It was a lot of fun, always a good time hanging out with wonderful adult children who you enjoy spending time with. But when Liz got home from work on Friday, she had texted me to say, hey, it's going to be a rainy, wet weekend. Let's get those Halloween decorations out, because we normally like to get them out earlier, but with travel, etc., we hadn't been able to do that. So we got the Halloween decorations up. We've got Zombie Pit, which we've done in the past with a sign that says "Don't Open Dead Inside." So we have the zombie hands coming out of the ground. We created basically a Grim Reaper sort of Crypt Keeper character with a wheelbarrow, holding a wheelbarrow up, and basically with bones in the wheelbarrow and a half-dug hole with bones popping out of it. We've got a skeleton sitting on the beautiful bench that Liz has put there, and of course for Thanksgiving, we actually had thankful and count your blessings. There's often a sign that's on that bench that's an inspiring sign. The most popular one was the inspirational quote was, "Do more things that make you forget to look at your phone." Which a lot of people, as they're walking by with strollers or walking their dogs, etc., would pause to see what sort of sign is there. So we're going to have to come up with something really creative for Halloween. Liz wanted to do a countdown to Halloween, and she wanted to start that, I think, in early September, right after Labor Day. But I was worried about us actually being able to change it every single day. So we're still looking for that inspirational quote, and we have almost half a month to get that done. But we got that done. We got a giant Grim Reaper on the roof. We've got another little guy with a knife. Looks like he's coming out of the bushes, as well as some lights that are there, orange colored lights. And obviously Barnaby on the step with some brains and some other decor there, as well as a few hanging characters. And we may add one or two more things, because, we want to add a few extra things. It's always fun to look at the way that people check out the house. We have Google Nest for the house, and our front doorbell, it actually has a camera built into it, and which is very, very handy when we're getting deliveries and stuff like that. We can actually talk to the people, because we have dogs, so that way we don't have to go to the door necessarily. We can just let them leave it there, or if I'm out at the grocery store or whatever, I can talk to them. But it was hilarious because I was at my mom's earlier this week, and I got a notification on my phone that someone was approaching the front door. And when I checked it, you can see it was hilarious. This person was delivering flyers from a local politician who's running in the Canadian national election. And it was hilarious looking at the look on his face, the very trepidatious look as he's walking up to the door. Kind of freaked out because of all the weird decorations. Maybe he was expecting something to jump out at him, but I thought that was kind of funny. In other things jumping out at you news, I was so excited to receive a contributor's copy of an anthology that I'm in called Cursed Collectibles, and it was edited by Angela Eschler, and it's basically stories that basically the summary is: spend an afternoon antiquing, and it's not hard to figure out why. Picking has become one of America's fondest pastimes. It's treasure hunting while connecting with history, but what if those treasures hunt us back? From old books to vinyl records, antique mirrors, vintage figurines, or a Bob's Big Boy piggy bank, curses have no limits. And this is an anthology that's being done in support of the Don Hodge Memorial Scholarship for Superstars Writing Seminars, and that's where lucky winners every year are under Don's name, and Don was a regular attendee of Superstars Writing Seminars. They get a chance to have their their tuition for the Superstars Writing Seminars paid. And I was very, very pleased to have one of my stories, which is a reprint, Requiem, in this anthology. And Requiem is a story of a collector of haunted artifacts. And my thought was, what if you had a whole bunch of collected artifacts and you put them in a room together? What if all the ghosts that were attached to these haunted artifacts didn't necessarily get along? Would they get along if they were kind of forced to cohabit together? So this is dark humor horror story, Requiem. And one of the experiences about this, and this is sort of a tip of the hat to Angela Eschler and Eschler Editing, which is the company that she runs. Now, Angela is a professional editor herself, but she also has a team of professional editors. And I believe it was the editor I was working with for this particular story was Lindsay. And even though this is a story that has been previously published and edited, that Lindsay actually brought even more great things out of the story. So this version of Requiem is the finest yet, and I'm really, really pleased with that. And oftentimes, if a story's already been edited, it feels a little bit intrusive to do that, but always great when you get to work with an amazing company like Eschler Editing and Lindsay, who is one of the editors there, to really pull out something new and fresh in this slightly tweaked revision of the story. So you can check out Cursed Collectibles online by going to books2read.com/cursed collectibles, and there you will find links to any of the retailers that it is on. And I am very, very proud to be part of this wonderful anthology. Well, that's it for the introductory matter for this episode. Let's get right into this interview with Mark Dawson. Hey, Mark, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Pleasure to be here.
So I want to go back to the beginning because there may actually be some people who haven't heard of you yet. I know it's kind of a weird thing, but there are, lots of people in the world, and maybe not all of them are big fans of Mark Dawson the way I am. You were not a writer originally. You were a legal professional? You were a lawyer?
I was, yes. So I qualified, I did law at university, and then I did a law degree. And then it just pushed me into the path of being a lawyer. So I practiced in London for about 5 or 6 years at a couple of different firms. And I don't really regret it. It's given me lots of useful skills, but I wasn't a very good lawyer. And I could very easily have plodded on. It's quite well paid, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't making me happy. So I was quite pleased to be able to get out and do something else.
Okay. And I know you had, before you became the Mark Dawson that I know and love, you had started by wanting to write and publishing some work. You did that. How did you do it the first time around?
Yeah, so I, back into 99, 2000, a friend at the law school, the law firm came in and said that I've just finished a novel, and he asked me if I'd read it. So I did, and it wasn't the best thing I'd ever read, but he had actually finished a 65,000 word novel, so that was impressive. And I think I'd always been thinking it would be quite cool to write something, and that was the kick in the pants I needed to actually get down and do one. So I finished, I think 3 short stories, I think it was, one of which involved Hiroshima, and one of which involved a rock and roll band, and then one other. And I sent them to an agent, and she wrote back and said, 'cause I think I'd lied a bit and said, I've got 3 novels, and here are some selections. And she picked the one with the rock and roll band and said, I really love this. I'd love to take you on, but can I see the rest of it? And I had I basically had to put her off for 3 months whilst I finished it, I still had a lot to do. So I finished that. She then sold it very quickly. So it was all very fast and surprisingly fast. And I was published by Pan Macmillan in the UK and I think in Russia, weirdly enough, in translation, around about the turn of the century, a couple of books. The first one's called The Art of Falling Apart, and the second one is called Supina Colada, and they were both published.
Alrighty, and so those came out in what, early 2000s? Is that when the book?
Yeah, I think 2000, 2001, 2002, that kind of time.
Okay, and what was that experience like for you? I mean, that was your first experience. You found an agent right away, which is quite astonishing, actually.
Yeah, I was surprised. I wasn't expecting it to be as simple as that, but I sent it to 3 agents, I think, that I'd picked out the artists and writers yearbook, and two of them came back and said they'd like to represent me, which so I was kind of thinking this was supposed to be hard, and it was, and I don't think they're particularly good books either, so I think I just got a bit lucky. And then I was again expecting the publication process to be difficult, and that was simple. I mean, the first one or two rounds produced people who wanted to publish it, and Macmillan, obviously a well-known trade house, very happy to work with them, and the editor was great. But it was not. I don't think the high point was I enjoyed going to the parties, and the editorial process was fun for someone who was thinking this was something I'd like to do for a career. It was great to get involved with that, but it reached I suppose an apogee when I saw my books on the shelf when they came out, and then I say this all the time, but it was at once a high point and then the start of a decline, because they weren't at eye level. They weren't, you worked in bookshops, the prime real estate is kind of eye level,
right?
Face out. Mine were shoe level, spine out. So I rearranged the shelves, obviously, as all good writers want to do. And then the next day, the staff doing their jobs properly had rearranged them back again. And that was that. Really. I didn't see anyone buying. I'd hang around the shelves hoping that someone would pick the book up, and I could see them go and take it to the checkout and buy it. I never saw that. I never saw anyone read them on the tube or on a bus or anything like that. And they didn't earn out. They both of them got decent advances, but they didn't sell enough to earn that advance back. And 2 strikes, they weren't prepared to give me a third strike, and that was that. So I stopped writing for about 7 years after that.
Oh, what I love about what you just shared with me, and we've never talked about this, so this is actually very fascinating to me, is the foreshadowing of this, which we're going to get to. I'm just teasing the listeners. Mm-hmm. So 6-7 years passed. Where did John Milton come from? Because that's the first big character that you're known for.
Yeah, so I wrote a couple of my kind of entrees to indie publishing were a couple of thrillers set in London during the Blitz and just after the Blitz. So I enjoyed writing those. It took quite a long time. By my standards these days, maybe 3 or 4 years for the 2 books, and I'd be writing a bit faster than that these days. I think they're pretty good books. I'm still proud of them, but they didn't sell very strongly because I didn't really know what I was doing. And Milton came along, and here it's there's Milton there. Milton came along because I had an idea kicking around in my head for ages of a character, like a contemporary updating of The Equalizer. So not the Denzel Washington version, the Edward Woodward version from the 80s.
Oh, yes.
Which I think was on CBS in the States.
Yes.
I love that. And I wanted to update that. So, and I thought I could do that. And the other benefit of writing Milton or a series with a character who is a bit of a Ronin going from place to place solving problems was because once his character was built and the world that he lived in was built, subsequent books would be easier to write because I wouldn't have to completely reinvent the wheel every time I started a new book. I would grow to know him as a character, and which has happened. And in terms of inspiration and ideas, I can think of just read the newspapers and where would I like him to go, and so that was pretty simple. And also the research was much less, so I didn't have to go to the National Archive in Kew to look at old case files. I didn't have to go to the newspaper archive in Colindale in North London and look through get the microfiches out and put them in the microfiche readers. And I still smell the smell of burning plastic today after spending a lot of time in there. So it was all kind of Googleable and could be done from my desk, or occasionally I might take a trip, but it was all pretty easy to get that together quickly.
So when did this indie journey of yours start then?
I think the first book was called The Black Mile, the first non-Milton book, and that was, I think, either 2011 or 2012. I could probably sit down and work it out, but it was around about that time. And then Milton came along, I think it was probably 2013, either back end of 2012, start of 2013. And, since then, I mean, there's 15 books in the Milton series now. I've spun off 2 characters, Beatrix and Isabella Rose. So 5 in, I think, maybe 6 books in each of those series now. So plus some other bits and bobs that I've written in the margins, and probably got over 30 books now, or near 35 books published since I started indie publishing about 8 years ago.
So at what point, because I know that you're very analytical, you love to look at numbers, you love to measure. At what point did you sit back and look at the numbers and say, wait a minute, this is something?
I can remember there's a few milestones. I remember the first check from Amazon. I was paid by checking those. It's for like $12, which was quite weird, given that usually I'm giving Bezos money and now he's sending me. So that was unusual. Then after that, I mean, the first time I figured out Facebook advertising, I was saying to my accountant, like, I've just spent $10 and I've made $40, and I wanted him to check my maths, because I'm not, I like numbers, but I'm not saying I'm any kind of guru or ninja when it comes to maths. And he was like, yep, you've basically found the best ATM in the world. Can I invest in your business, please? But then the first time I thought maybe had I made it, or at least I was on the way to doing it, was start of 2014. My wife was on maternity leave, and I was still working. So I was commuting from Salisbury to London and back every day. So it's 3 hours on the train. And in January of 2014, I was working in the film industry, and I, for the first time, matched the amount that I was taking home from my day job with the amount that I was taking home from my writing. And I said to my wife's much more ballsy than me, and she was like, you should probably quit. You can do this full time now. And because I'm more cautious, and because she was on maternity leave and I didn't want to I want to gamble too much, I said that if I can match this for a year, if I can match my day job salary for a year, then I think I'll feel comfortable that I can leave. And the next month I doubled it, and the next month after that I doubled it, and by the time I left, I was probably earning 5 or 6 times what I was taking from my day job. And I figured out by that stage that it was more expensive for me not to quit than
Well,
to quit.
Yeah, you had matched the money before you got to the end of the year. So you're like, okay, I think we're good.
Yeah. And also, obviously my day job, technically I was supposed to work from 9 to 5 for them. And they were paying me X. And in the kind of the spare time, so the 3 hours on the train I had, I was making X times 7 probably. So it was, by that stage, if you worked out how much the hours in my day could generate, I could generate much more by writing than I could by watching movies. So it was pretty simple at that stage. I couldn't really, it would be irresponsible not to have quit.
Okay, and that's fantastic. And I remember kind of being there and watching your rise on the different platforms. But it wasn't enough that you were successful as an independent author. It was a case where you saw something and saw a way that you could help other writers. So how did the self-publishing podcast, or back in the day, the self-publishing formula, how did that whole aspect come about?
Well, I'm quite competitive, and I don't like people. Well, I like to match myself with other people. And anyway, so Nick Stevenson, who's a friend, had his first course, and it's a good course. And Nick gave me an idea of how much he'd made on that first launch, and I thought, well, I know I've sold more books than Nick has, and he's a good teacher. I wonder if I could do that too. So I got in touch with James and John, who I work with in SPF, and we put the first advertising for authors, or Facebook ads for authors, as it was back in those days. Because I was one of the first authors to crack the Facebook advertising code. And so we put that course together and we released it, and we did do better. And since then we've released our courses. It's 2 courses now, and they're each released twice a year. So 4 launches throughout the year of the 2 courses. And since then, I think we've taught certainly more than 10,000 students now across all those courses. We've got a great Facebook group that we like doing the podcast. We give away a lot of free stuff. We've got a conference next year, which is effectively, we'll be losing a bit of money on that, but it's going to be a load of fun to do it. So, it is nice to be able to give a little back. And also, we were at Nick together, and I don't know, maybe half a dozen people came up to me and said that they'd either retired themselves to write, or they'd retired their husbands, which is a nice new development we're starting to see. couples working together, and pointing to the moment they figured out how to advertise. And I'd like to think I gave them some clues along that path. And it's pretty tough to beat that kind of feeling when someone says that you've changed their lives. And I probably don't change lives with my books, but it is possible to change lives when you're teaching authors how to make a living with their books. And that's always been just, we love that kind of feedback.
So now that you have that, how do you, and you're still producing, novels, how do you balance your time with the creative Mark Dawson, who's creating the thrillers, and the Mark Dawson who is the teacher, the instructor, the mentor, helping other writers?
Cloning helps. That's been tremendously helpful. It's a challenge, a daily challenge. We think there's other things we're going on as well that we, probably won't mention tonight. But there's loads of stuff on my plate. So for the book side of things, which would be the thing that I would choose if I had to choose between the two, I would write. That's just me, really. There isn't anybody else. My brother is helping me with the bits and bobs around the corners now, and I'd like to bring him on a bit more. But apart from that, there isn't anybody else. Obviously I've got, Stuart Bache does my covers. I've got an editorial set up now. There are contractors that I can reach out to, but it is basically just me. With SPF, there's probably, I'm going to say 10 of us now. And there's me, James, and John. Young Tom is a full-time employee of the company. We've got 3 or 4, maybe 5 VAs around the world to help with us at different time zones. So SPF is supporting probably 10 people now, which is great. But if we didn't have that kind of network around me, it wouldn't be possible. And James is very good. James knows to shield me from as much stuff as possible. And that's not to say that I'm not approachable, because I try to be, but I don't have to answer every email. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of people who would take advantage of my time, and James and John as well, but James especially is very good at making sure that he steps in and filters things to me if they need to come to me.
Right. I think, it's critical to protect that creative, that IP that started it all, right?
Yeah, and as James says, my main job in the company is, I suppose I'm the CEO, and without getting too on my own arse, the kind of the visionary and the strategist. But my main job is to be a best-selling author, because I've said this in our group, you see it all the time. Whenever there's a gold rush, usually the people who make the most money are the people selling shovels and picks. And we see that in the indie space. I'm seeing it more with people coming along with no real track record, who will promise to teach people how to do something that they can't do.
Right.
So my first piece of advice when people are asking me about a service provider or a piece of software or a course is to can they walk the walk and talk the talk? That's the thing you need to look at. What the Amazon rankings like? Are they telephone numbers? If they are, what are they going to teach you? Why aren't they doing it themselves? That's common sense. But my main job is when people look to take one of our courses, they can look me up on Amazon, and I think I'm the 4th highest action and adventure writer at the moment in the States, which is, so I'm selling books. So hopefully, provided I can teach a little bit, and maybe I can show people what I do.
Oh, that's fantastic. And the thing that boggles my mind is knowing so many hugely successful authors like yourself, who are, easily in the 7 figures of the income that they make from their writing, is even though you have fans around the world, you put out a new release and you're getting downloads in dozens of countries immediately, and you have people just waiting for that next book that you write. There's still an element of discoverability that comes from the fact that, in many estimates, between 20 and 30% of readers are actually reading ebooks, because print is still dominant in our industry, which is why we all think that traditional publishers have their heads up their butts. It's because they're focusing on a different element. But you have just done something that I've been waiting years for. I've been waiting for this moment, and I got to congratulate you in person at NINC last week. But you just signed a groundbreaking deal that I think is going to change the face of publishing in general for indies and traditional publishers. Can we please talk about that?
Yeah. So it is really cool, and I kind of posted it in the SPF group, and I don't know that everyone really got it, which
Yeah.
people were saying I'm selling out, which is clearly not the case.
Not at all. No.
So yeah, you're right. So this is kind of the holy grail for me, and has been for a little while. Is that I'm pretty good at selling ebooks, to the extent that it would take a stupendous deal for me to sell a publisher to license the ebook rights to any of my books, because without bigging myself up too much, I think I can sell those rights better than they can. So why would I give them away unless they're going to park a Brinks truck at the bottom of my drive and tip lots of money onto my property? So that's not going to happen. So what I've been trying to do for ages is to negotiate a deal whereby I would take the step back a bit. So if you think about a book as an asset, so once you've written it, you become less creatively attached to it, and what you should be looking at is now it's something to monetize. So it's an ASIN or a SKU. That's what it's a widget effectively. So we're looking to sell the various permutations of that widget, so we make as much money as we can. So there's digital rights, there's audiobook rights, there's film and TV, there's translation rights, audio translations. There's lots of ways that we can sweat that asset. And the biggest, most of those I can do myself. The biggest one, as you said, the 70% of the market is print, and print is very difficult for indies to do ourselves. And I had started to look at whether we could get into that. So my brother went to Clay's, which is a big printing house in the UK. They do the Harry Potter books, and they did Margaret Atwood, or they do all the big releases. And we got some numbers for a print run, 2,000 or 3,000 copies of the first book in the series. We also, through the SPF community, had a way into Waterstone, so one of the big retailers in the UK. And we thought there's a good chance that we could get those books onto the shelves of Waterstones in the north of England, in Scotland. And that would give us a use case to demonstrate to Waterstones more generally that these books would sell. So we'd started to look at that. In the meantime, in fact, slightly before then, my agent had gone out to Morocco for a birthday party, and she was at dinner. She was sitting next to someone she knows, a guy called Mark Smith, who is not Aussie. He came to the UK, I'm guessing 20 years ago, got into publishing. He's an entrepreneur, I think. He's very entrepreneurial, but he got into publishing and established, now, which was his first, I think it was Quercus was the first imprint that he established. And with that, bought the rights to Stieg Larsson, the Millennium Trilogy. He published those for the first time in the UK, and lots of other big hits after that. He then moved to Bonnier, Zafra Books, set up another imprint there. And whilst at Bonnier, they bought Wilbur Smith in an 8-figure deal. They bought Linda DePlant. So they're acquiring at a fast rate. And my agent Annabelle gave him the first Milton book, and he read all of them very quickly. He read all 50, which happens quite often, which is lovely. I get emails from like that quite a lot, which is great to hear. And Mark read them, he loved them, he wanted to work with me. So we started talking about the kind of parameters of a deal. Originally, he was interested in taking all the rights, and I was very flattered by that, but I was not interested because I don't want to give away rights that I can sell. So I said, look, how about a print-only deal? Because Hugh Howey, well-known 5 or even 6 years ago now, did a print-only deal for Wool. I think Bella Andre may have done something similar for her romances.
Yeah, she
so
did.
It's been done. And one of those really frustrating things is that it should be a no-brainer. So you've got these properties which they can be demonstrated to sell at high volumes. They get great reviews. Readers love them. Why wouldn't they love them in print as much as they love them in digital? It made absolutely no sense to me why we hadn't seen a flood of these deals. I think there are reasons. Mark, we haven't chatted about that, but he thinks there are reasons why this hasn't happened. But he was, bless him, prepared to take a chance. He left Bonnier, unfortunately. We negotiated the deal, but before we could sign it, he left. So we were like, that's a pain. Anyway, we kind of lost contact for about a year, and then at London Book Fair last year, I bumped into him on the stand, and he said, I can't tell you too much, but something new is happening, and I'd like to pick up that conversation again with you once that's happened in a month's time. He then went to my agent, and he and another entrepreneur with some funding had bought a Carlton Books with lots of different imprints in the UK. So they bought this established publisher and have set up a number of new imprints, including one called Welbeck. I don't know if that'll be the one that I come out under, but they their first acquisition were the print rights to the Milton books. So we have a joint venture. So I put in the intellectual property. They put in the funding for print, distribution, warehousing, all their contacts. We'll do editing, new covers possibly, and those books will come out the 3 next year, 3 the year after that, 3 the year after that, and basically 3 a year until 2025. So we are excited. It's going to be fun.
And so what I think I like about this is I think the terms of the deal, as I understand them, are everyone makes money rather than in previous deals, there has been a huge advance, one that is very rare for a publisher to make back. Therefore, it's like a one done deal. And then the publisher goes, oh no, that was a dumb idea. I shouldn't have done that. This isn't the case. In this case, it's not that at all, as I understand it.
No, it's a joint venture, so there's no advance. So they don't have to take a big risk, although they are taking the risk in that they are funding the cost of the operation, so the capital requirement. They're meeting that. I'm not putting any money in. I'm putting in the IP, which is is a valuable. That's the valuable asset that I can contribute to the pie or the pot. They can contribute cash and expertise and contacts. And so between the two of us, and obviously I can help them with marketing. So as a part of the deal, I will be working with them once or twice a month so they can tap the digital marketing expertise that I've built up over the last 5-6 years. So it should be one of those deals where everyone wins. It's very equitable. That they're not looking to recoup a huge advance, as you say. It's not like that at all. It is just a deal whereby we benefit equally, assuming that these books sell. And who knows? Maybe they won't. Maybe they will. So,
but it seems to have adapted the best of both worlds, right? So you have a much faster release strategy, because typically in traditional publishing, it's 1 book a year, but you're already starting off with 3. So looking at fulfilling a need and then fulfilling it fast. Right, much faster, and physical. Right, there's distribution. This isn't just, hey, it's print on demand. It's sitting on a website waiting for someone to go to Amazon and order. They're going to be able to find this book maybe at eye level in bookshops.
Yeah, that's the idea. So I mean, we're hoping that we'll be in Waterstones. It will, more relevantly, it'll be in airport bookstores. That's a perfect market for my books. It'll be in Smiths. Also, the deal has international elements. So they're working with very well-known publishers. I mean, very, very well-known publishers in the US, Australia, South Africa, to get the books into those stores as well. And plus there's loads of benefits. It's easier to sell film rights with a. Unfortunately, this is, and I've had some success the other way around, but it is still easier to get a producer to take you more seriously if you have a more traditional way of getting the books out there. So we will have that, and plus, obviously, as there'll be campaigns running when these books go live. That will mean I sell more digital books, as people will find out about the Milton books, and then maybe they'll go, you know what? There are 15 of these available. I don't want to wait until 2025. I'm going to buy a Kindle or a Kobo device, and I'm going to read all of them right now. So everyone wins. It's a pretty cool deal, and hopefully this won't be the last time that we see this. I mean, obviously, if we can make a success of this, then there's more chance that model will be adapted. But it's not hard to look around the community now and think of big selling indies who sell more than me, who this would be perfect for. The romance writers, that kind of model with lots of content should be an absolute no-brainer. Shane Silver's writing his his urban fantasy, the Andalays of the world. There's so many writers who could do this kind of thing. So let's see. In some ways, I suppose I'm the canary down the coal mine. So if I'm still chirping by the end of next year, maybe it's worked.
Well, I am really excited about this opportunity. Thanks for sharing that and talking about it. It's funny because as you mentioned, I have been waiting for a deal like this. And when I saw the announcement, I thought, okay, great, everyone's going to pick up on this. But it hasn't yet. I don't think people understand the depth of what this actually means is in my mind as the next tipping point in our evolution. Like one of them being the Kindle was a major tipping point for ebooks. And then of course, this to me is that wonderful tipping point where all the smartness of traditional publishing combines with the smartness of indie publishing to make something much bigger than the sum of its parts. And I really am looking forward to where this takes us. So thank you for being a pioneer.
Yeah. It'll be fun. I mean, it works the other way as well. So you may start to see the big traditionally published authors looking at the IP that they produce in terms of the assets that they can strip off. Say this new Stephen King book. He probably not the kind of writer who'd do this, but someone of that stature could look and think, well, I've got lots of different IPs here. I don't need to sell them all to Random House.
Yeah.
Maybe the one I want to sell to Random House is the print, and I'll do everything else myself.
Right.
Almost certainly make more money that way. I mean, whether they want to actually do the work of doing that is a different question. But you could easily see mid-list authors now saying, "Look, actually, why am I licensing everything?" There's a happy medium where everyone wins. So we'll see. It's one of those things I think has the potential to take us up to a slightly different stage along the journey than where we've been so far. So it is exciting.
It is. And you've got so many exciting things on the horizon. I know that your 2020 conference, even though it's the middle of the winter, is already sold out so many months in advance. That's going to be an amazing opportunity. And I love that you're tying it in with London Book Fair. So a major rights fair for traditional combined with this powerful indie movement. And I love the way that those are crossing over.
Yeah, that was I picked that date deliberately. So it was mostly because I knew that lots of writers would be in London at the time, or those writers who wanted to go have been thinking about going to the book fair. This might be the extra, the sugar on the cherry on top that persuades them to give that a go. So yeah, that was great, and we sold out 920 seats in about 2 days, which was ludicrous, but really flattering.
It's amazing. So one sort of last question, because you have gone, in the last 8 years, you have gone into a tremendous new career, helping so many other writers. There's probably people listening to this that they hear you say, when you get that first $12 check from Amazon, they go, really? I'm still waiting for my first $12 check. What sort of advice would you go back and give to that writer who's just starting off on that journey?
I saw actually someone posted in one of our groups today about expecting, it to be easier than it is, and it isn't easy. If it was easy, we'd all be retired and writing on Caribbean islands. So it is hard work. I mean, fortunately, it's writing, which is fun, and then if I find the actual business side of it almost as much fun as the writing, which is great. So you need to be prepared to do a little bit of slog. The more content you have, the more money you stand to make through things like read through. If you have a first book, then there's more books in the series. Then, you could write a book about ghosts, and then you have another book about ghosts, and you can get a read through into those books. But kind of as a general rule is to be professional, to work hard, and to remember that you're in competition on virtual bookshelves with not just indies like me, but also traditional houses. The readers don't give two hoots as to who published the book for the most part, unless you give them a reason to notice that your product isn't as good as the lead child book that you're competing with. So you want to make sure as much as possible that your covers stand out. It's impeccably edited, and it's the best thing that you can write. So don't expect, it's not get rich quick. Those days, if they were ever here, have long since gone. But the good news is we are still very much in the vanguard here, and it's easy. People listen to this podcast, and people listen to our podcast, and I mean, in the same places that we go to. It's very easy to think that everyone knows what we know. A bit of an echo chamber. So you think, well, everyone knows what's possible with independent publishing. Most people have no idea, and my time is spent quite a lot educating people that you don't need an agent anymore, or you don't need, this isn't vanity publishing. It couldn't be further from the truth. You can do it all yourself. So we are kind of, I think we're still, this is kind of almost day one. Day 1.5 maybe of, Amazon always says it's Bezos's thing is it's day one on the internet. I think it's kind of day one for independent publishing, and that's very exciting. There's loads and loads more scope to push this a lot further than we have already.
I love those words, because it's a reminder that we're still in the beginning. We're in the pioneering days of what's happening with digital publishing. You're so right. People think the Kindle gold rush is over. This whole new movement has just begun. So that's a great reminder of that. Thank you. Yeah,
no, it's exciting. We said in the podcast, there's never been a better time to be a writer than that. I really believe that. It is. It's never been easier to have a career as doing something creative that lots and lots of people would. If you told me 15 years ago, when I was a miserable lawyer, that I would be sitting here being able to do a podcast, in a house that I bought with the proceeds of selling the weird ideas in my head, I would have said you are off your trolley. And that is exactly what's happened. So it's crazy but amazing time to be doing what we do.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to share this amazing journey with my listeners.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Always.
I know I've said it multiple times. I said it multiple times in the conversation with Mark, but I can't express enough how important this deal is that Mark Dawson just signed. I can't express how forward-thinking it is. I can't express how impressed I am with the fortitude of Mark Dawson, as well as with the publisher, the other Mark, who signed that deal. This has the makings of what you might call a beautiful friendship. This has the makings of something that can be built upon and can establish the new way to do business. In my book, The 7 P's of Publishing Success, one of the P's that I talked about, a valuable P, was partnership. Now, partnership is really collaboration and partnership, and you see a lot of great partnerships and collaboration that happen in the indie author community. You see some great partnerships and collaboration that happen in traditional publishing, and that's part of what the book fairs are all about, the London Book Fair, and you're seeing that the London Book Fair is happening, and the self-publishing show conference is happening in conjunction with that, which is going to be happening in 2020. And this is as Mark and his publisher are gearing up for this bold new venture in publishing. I really think that combining the strengths and abilities and what each person brings to the table in the best way possible, by combining those strengths and working together and working collaboratively and partnering to succeed, I think we're going to see something truly amazing here. And I'm really excited to watch it unfold, because it looks like they did this properly. It looks like they've taken the care and the consideration into making sure that this is a win-win-win situation, that everybody involved has something good to gain from it. So kudos and congratulations to Mark Dawson. Kudos and congratulations to his publisher. And kudos and congratulations to you for listening to me harp on and on and on about this. But again, I cannot express enough how exciting this is. And I'm so delighted that that got to be the topic of episode 100 of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. Again, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, your host for the podcast. If you found this podcast informative, insightful, inspiring, maybe even infuriating, no, not infuriating. If you found it any of those other ends, feel free to share it with a friend that you think would find value in the podcast. Again, this is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre, with episode 100 of the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with me this week. I look forward to hanging out with you again next week in episode 101. And so, until next week and next episode, here's wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.